Welcome to New York Got Game.
All right, we're here with another edition of New York Got Game, and we're back because the NBA season is back. That's right, it starts this week, and we do not have time to waste. We're going to get right into it on this episode. Got two special guests joining me, as we do each year, to break down the New York Knickerbockers. So let's get right into it.
The Knicks are heating up.
It's that time of year where the Knicks season tips off on Tuesday, so it's time for our annual Knickerbockers season preview. Back with me to preview the 2024-2025 season is the Dean of Knicks Film School, Jonathan Macri, and the founder and host of Knicks Fan TV, CP the Franchise. Both guys join me now. What's going on, guys?
My guys,
How you doing?
Another one on the way. Another
Always
season
a pleasure.
on the way, man.
Another season on the way.
Yeah.
I've seen you guys throughout the summer and the off season. I've seen you, saw you in Vegas, ran into you, but the same. How was the off season for you guys?
It was fantastic. I felt like John, he just asked me that before we started recording, and I felt like we really didn't have an offseason. Because we went from draft to blockbuster trade from the Mikal Bridges to summer league and overreactions and those things that we love to do. Then Karl Anthony Towns. So I felt like we really haven't had a true break, but it's been a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Like the quietest time, I watch you guys' content all the time. The quietest time might have been like late August to like early to mid-September, right before training. That was the quietest time.
But even then, it took a long time to process, I think, what the team was going to be. And then when you had finally gotten to the point where you felt like that was fully there, then the Towns trade drops and everything else goes, up in smoke.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to start, in this preview. I want to talk to everybody about this because I want to start this for both of you, question for both of you, because the Knicks, obviously, this offseason made some significant moves, including Mikal Bridges, the top of the offseason, and the Karl Anthony Towns trade at the end of the offseason. For both of you, were those trades worth it in your eyes, and how does it change the identity of this New York Knickerbockers franchise? J-Mac, I'll start with you first on this one.
Well, I think when you talk about their identity, it's tough to say that their identity didn't change because they, even as they got more and more talent over the last few years, I think they were still kind of thought of as the underdog, right? As the team that, hey, we might not out-talent you, but you're going to feel it the next morning after you play us. And I think that maybe got lost a little bit, if for no other reason, Julius Randle, one of the most physical players in the league, Dante DiVincenzo, he's smaller, but kind of has that same reputation. Now, their talent level is higher, and I would argue that their ceiling is higher, but they're going to try to beat teams a different way now, and that's the biggest change for me. We'll see if it ends up working out.
Yeah, it is a different look, right? Totally different look, different team. We'll get to that a little bit deeper, but for you, did you feel like these moves the Knicks made were worth it? Because CP, that ties into a little bit about what Max says there, right? It's people love when you're the underdog. Fans love it. They love the team when they're the underdog. They were the hunters. Now they are somewhat hunted because people aren't sleeping on them. So how do you feel about these moves that they made in the position that it puts them in?
Listen, the underdog role is great to a certain extent. But in the NBA, to win it all, man, you've got to have a complementary team, and you've got to have some top-end talent there as well. And so for the Knicks, you had to take a risk. They had to roll the dice there to extend their ceiling, to raise their ceiling a bit. And by putting Towns in there who can play off of Brunson, who can space the floor for them and really tap into what modern NBA offenses are doing, I approve the vision. And like I was saying on Twitter the other day, we can't question Leon Rose, man, because they are hitting on all cylinders. And so I'm sitting here, I'm saying, look, I hated losing DiVincenzo, man.
Yeah,
that was tough.
Painful.
That was tough. Yeah. Because last week when you saw the trade fallout, I looked at that as, damn, that emotion, that grit, that's what we had last year with this guy, man. Like, I like that from him. And we're gonna miss that on top of the three-point shooting.
Everything you said there, and I had mixed feelings, and I texted both you guys after the Towns trade, right? And I think one of the things I said to you was like, kind of wasn't really feeling it, and my vibe was completely different after the Bridges trade. I love that move. I thought that was a great move. I've come around on the Towns trade. I've liked it. You guys have talked a little sense into me on that. Yeah, I personally feel those moves are worth it. I feel the moves are worth it, right? Because at some point, like you're saying, CP, you got to get from point A to point B. You have to try to elevate. Some of it is a little difficult. You have to change your look. I think it was worth it for the Knicks. I'm glad you guys agree with this. Let me ask this to you too, CP, because we've now gone through from the offseason to the preseason. You watch the Knicks in the preseason, and you see this new look. What stood out to you the most about this team's new look and what you saw from them in the preseason?
Well, it's like Macri said, it's a complete change in philosophy. right? When you bring in Towns and you're trying to go 5 out. And that's what you saw even in the preseason. You saw 68 pick and rolls between Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. You saw more potential in their chemistry in their two-man game than you ever saw with Brunson and Randall in 2 years. So you see where they're trying to go with that, and it's encouraging to see, especially when Cat is hitting. So you saw how truly spaced the floor can be. Defensively, we saw in some games, it's been up and down, but seeing Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby really getting after it, you kind of saw a preview of what they can look like defensively and getting easy shots, easy points in transition. So you saw some good things there. Bench with some question marks, but that's what the preseason's for, so iron out those kinks.
That is what it's for. Okay, now you heard that from CP right there. Bench with some question marks. And Knicks fans, I know this is one of what you want to get into right here, question marks with the bench. J-Mac, depth. There's been a concern from the Knicks fans, right? You've heard it from Knicks fans. You've heard it from the media with the Knicks this season. Now, also we have to say, look, we know Landry Shamet is going to be out for a little bit. Precious Achiuwa is going to be reevaluated in 2 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. Do you think the Knicks have enough to withstand the grind of an 82-game season and potential playoff run with the depth that they currently have on this roster?
The irony of you asking this question today, where we learned of the Precious news, because we're recording this on Sunday, is crazy, because what's everybody been concerned about? People have been concerned about, well, is OG Anunoby going to be able to make it through a season? Is Karl-Anthony Towns going to be able to make it through a season? Those guys made it through the preseason just fine, and yet these other guys who you figure were going to be reliable pieces, they're the ones that got banged up. I think all things considered, you need to see where they're at come April, whatever it is, 14th, 15th, when the playoffs start. Because if they're okay then, I think even if they go through the regular season and they lose some games maybe they wouldn't lose if they were fully healthy, just get to that point in one piece. We saw the Sixers last season fell all the way to the 7th seed. They gave the Knicks a tough series, right? Now, the Knicks were the better team, but even if the Knicks enter the playoffs not as the 1 seed or the 2 seed, just maybe get home court advantage, let's say. If that's what it comes to, that's the most important thing. I think they will struggle out of the gate. I'm going to put that on the radar right now, because these first 10 games, no picnic. And I think having to rely on, is it a Jericho Sims? Is it an Ariel Huck-Porty? Is it one of these other rookies, Pacome Dadier, Tyler Kolek? That's asking a lot against teams like Boston, Indiana, who run these complex offenses that could beat you in a lot of ways. So I think the depth may be an issue early. Remains to be seen if it's going to be an issue in April, May, and hopefully June. So
when I hear that, right, and you said it could be a rough first 10 games for the Knicks, right? You look at the schedule, it's not easy. You know this. Let's say they are 5-5 after 10 games, guys. You know there's going to be a segment of the fan base that is going to hit panic mode. I've heard it already. Shout out to my homie Ned Okatar. He's been panicking about the lack of the Knicks depth. So I have to put it out there. He's going to be like, hey, they didn't have enough. They didn't do enough. This is the kind of world we're in with the new CBA, with the aprons. You're kind of limited in that. So, and I'm told this to both of you guys, is there an opportunity for some of the young players you mentioned, whether it's Huck-Porty, whether it's Kolek, to take advantage of this time, sort of be thrown into the fire? Could that actually be a good thing for the Knicks? Whoever wants to take it.
Certainly possible. I mean, where they are right now with 12 guys on their active roster, they've lost Shamet. You don't know if he's going to return. Precious Achiuwa now scheduled to miss time. Between Tyler Kolek, even Pacome Dadier, and Huck-Porty, those guys might get thrown into the fire early. Now, is that test for them? Will that help them later on? Certainly possible. But for Tom Thibodeau, right now, you really don't have that many options. You don't have a choice but to play some of these guys, and hopefully they can, overcome some of that adversity. But I'm with John. I think they're going to struggle out of the gate, but for especially the fans, because expectations are ratcheted up now, right? There's so many ebbs and flows to an NBA season. It's really about April, man. So we can't get too low on, this guy, his shot's not there, or they're struggling here, they're struggling there. We've got to see where they finish in April and how they look beyond that, because they could end up being a better playoff team than they are a regular season team.
And at the end of the day, that would be better. That's what you want more. You want the team to be playing their best basketball at the end of the season, and then also you want them to be healthy. That is another thing, too. CP, this one for you, because you mentioned Karl-Anthony Towns. Let's look at him directly. He had a mixed preseason performance in terms of, I would say, shooting the ball. What have you seen from him thus far that you feel like Knicks fans should really be excited about, right? Because preseason, you said it's the time to work out the kinks, see all that. What are you excited for with Cat, or I don't know what nickname. Are we going with Bodega Cat?
Bodega Cat.
I like Bodega Cat. I'm
Bodega
rocking
Cat.
with
You got to go Bodega
Okay,
Cat.
shout out to Stephen Bondi, my colleague, coworker, because he has been all over the Bodega Cat. I like Bodega Cat.
Yeah.
What do you like about what you've seen from Bodega Cat?
Well, being as that floor spacing big that the Knicks have needed for so many years, the potential is there. You saw some of that in their preseason win against the Wizards at home in Madison Square Garden, like playing off of Jalen Brunson, being able to knock down those threes. He came along stronger in the second half, but as a career 40% three-point shooter, you know he's going to be there more nights than not. What I'm looking at is the other ways that he's going to impact the game. Rebounding is going to be a key for this Knicks team. That was part of their identity over the past 4 years under Tom Thibodeau with Julius there. So Cat's got to get after it on the boards and maintain that edge every single night. Defensively, manning that rim. Even though you have Bridges and Anunoby there, and you hope to be more stout in the perimeter, holding it down back there and protecting the rim is going to be important for Karl-Anthony Towns. So seeing him impact the game in those ways is what I like to see. But the potential, man, two-man game with Brunson and Towns, your point guard and your big man, you need that. Jokic and Murray, you need that connection, and I see a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I see a lot. I see you smiling with that. Eyes have been lighting up, smiling for the Knicks fans about that Brunson and Cat pick and roll potential there. We'll see how that goes. J-Mac, when you look at this starting lineup now with the addition of Towns, one of the big questions, and we saw Josh Hart talk about this, he says he feels like he's lost right now, right? He only had, 2 points, 4 shots in the preseason. How do you see his role evolving within this starting five, especially with more offensive options around him on the court?
Well, first thing I'd like to do is implore Josh Hart to go purchase a map of perhaps the court, because there is no scenario where Josh Hart was ever going to have plays called for him with this roster, with this talent, as you just eloquently talked about with Karl-Anthony Towns. And his role on this team is the same as it was last year, and that's to come in and be the Energizer Bunny. His action, whatever he's doing, whether it's playmaking, whether it's rebounding, whether it's pushing the pace, all of those things spurs on energy of his teammates. If he's not bringing the energy himself, that's an issue. Now, if Josh Hart is feeling like, well, I'm having trouble finding that reserve of energy because I know I'm not going to get any shots, and he thinks those will be easier to come across in the starting five or out of the starting five, I'm happy to have that conversation, because Deuce McBride is a guy who I think has already shown the ability, if you want me to be a catch-and-shoot guy, I'll be a catch-and-shoot guy. That's not Josh Hart's game. He needs to be flying around. The interesting thing with Hart, to go back to your question from a few minutes ago, now with this Achua injury, is it necessary to add some more rebounding to the bench unit? Might that be a reason to stick Josh Hart on the bench? And I've been a proponent of him starting, to be clear, but maybe with this injury news, it's time to consider a change there.
That would be interesting if he does go back to the bench. I'm not as worried about his preseason as maybe some other people are. I feel like he's going to bring the energy and turn the lights on. You want to say something, CP? Go ahead. Yeah.
Of all the players on the team, he's the one guy who I would expect can handle and make that adjustment. He had to do it last year. He did it when he first came in. He did it in the playoffs last year. And so I think we have to understand that the role that he had in the playoffs last year, you needed him to be more of an engine for that team because they had no one else. And he played that role well. Yeah. Damn near triple-doubles, all that. Played all the minutes. He was facilitating, rebounding. He did everything. He doesn't have to do that with this starting five. He's got to impact the game like I talked about with Towns. Maintain that rebounding edge, push the ball ahead like he always does, getting the team out in transition, making the high IQ plays. And then when he does get the ball, be confident enough to step in, take that three-point shot, and get some timely three-point buckets. Like, I could see him going into Boston on Tuesday and getting like 3 threes, but one of them being like a big three in the fourth quarter. That's what we need from Josh Hart, man. He'll figure it out.
I can see it. I love the point you made there. He's figured it out before. Remember, he was not that happy at the beginning of last season with the amount of shots he was getting. And then that went away.
He's like Tibbs. He's not happy unless he's miserable. So there are 2 peas in a pod.
I feel like that's not healthy, but yeah, okay. Yeah, there we go. All right, we'll see. CP, let me ask you this about Jalen Brunson, because you were just waxing poetic about his potential in the pick and roll with Karl-Anthony Towns. Breakout year last year, right? Top 5 in MVP voting. Do you think he can continue to elevate his game and be more efficient than he was last season, considering he's got more talent around him, particularly in the starting 5?
I think he can, and he's got to look to understand that he can make this whole team better. But they're going to need him to do that. because he still is the number one most reliable option on this team. And so you have the two-man game potential with Karl Anthony Towns. You have OG Anunoby out there, who's a shooting threat from three, especially spacing out to the corners. Mikal Bridges, once he gets his jumper down pat, you have him in there. So he has to understand that he doesn't have to do it every single night, but he's got to be able to trust his teammates to get the job done. And then hopefully, if that offense is clicking and they're getting the solid ball movement, as we saw in spurts of this preseason, then he can get the ball back and provide the Knicks with some much-needed firepower from beyond, because they're going to need that from him as well.
Yeah, he's been so good as a leader, right? And I think a lot of people believe in his leadership. I really do believe there's a world this season with Jalen Brunson where he can be more efficient than he was last year. I kind of expect the assists to go up this year.
Yeah.
I think those numbers can go up. I think his shooting efficiency, just because he's not required to do as much. But when he is, I think you guys both will be like, hey, I believe in him. I count on this guy to get it done. So we'll see with Jalen Brunson if he's more efficient this year than he was last year. J-Mac, this is a question I like to ask, I feel like every year, every playoff season, I love to ask this. Who do you see as the biggest X factor for the Knicks this season in a way that who do you see can really impact and swing this team's success? Is there one guy that you think can do that?
So I think the implied in the definition of X factor, as I consider it, is that it's a player who maybe not isn't a sure thing, but there is a wide range of outcomes that you could expect from them when they go and play. And my answer is Karl Anthony Towns, which, if you're putting two and two together, well, wait a minute. Karl Anthony Towns makes upwards of $50 million a year. That's not the sort of guy that you want to have the wide range of outcomes for. You want to have more certainty. You want to have more of a sure thing. And I think the reason why Karl Anthony Towns is a Knick is because Minnesota, for the price they're paying, it wasn't enough of a sure thing for them. So I need Karl Anthony Towns to come to this team and be the best version of himself that he's shown thus far in his career. He does not need to be Joel Embiid. He does not need to be Nikola Jokic. If you're the best version of Cat, what do? You're shooting efficiently, number one, but on volume. And that's why I don't think there's anyone like him, because even Jokic, even Embiid, nobody puts up threes at that position at the rate that he does with the efficiency that he does. And that by itself, I think, could open up an offense when you have the Knicks' other skill position players, specifically Jalen Brunson, where they could be the number one offense in the league. And then if you look where the league is trending the last few years, not saying defense doesn't matter, I want to be very clear about that, but offense is what wins championships now. It's not the 80s, it's not the 90s, it's not the 2000s anymore. Things are different. I think that's why they went out and made the deal, and he needs to be that version of himself that could check all of those boxes on offense and then be good enough on defense.
CP, I saw you initially when J-Mac said that. You were nodding. Do you agree? Is that your X factor too for the Knicks?
He's going to be very important.
Yeah.
And as he said, offense is winning games nowadays, but I'm going to look at Mikal Bridges.
Sure.
You know, his shot is lost. He's trying to figure that part out. But also, I think either from a secondary or even a tertiary standpoint, they need another reliable shot creator. And I looked at that preseason game against the Wizards. He logged a lot of minutes with that second unit. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think he will be utilized in terms of how Tibbs staggers that rotation, kind of breaks up that big three, put Mikal Bridges out there with Payne and Deuce McBride and allow Mikal Bridges to generate some offense for you. He's going to be very important. He can't just be along for the ride and just be, supporting cast and, be outlet for shooting 3 and D. That's fine. This floor is fine. But he's got to take it up a notch for this team to really be able to meet their goals. I think Mikal Bridges offensively is going to be very important for this team.
I like both of those answers, Cat and Mikal Bridges. I think Mikal will figure out the shot. I'm not as worried about that. We'll see how that goes with that. Now, look, we got to talk about backup center, okay? Because once the Cat trade was made, there was a lot of talk about Mitchell Robinson. We know he's going to be out for a bit, dealing with injuries. The backup center role could be in flux. Do you think Jericho Sims or Ariel Huck-Purdy? Do you think CP, either of them have shown enough in the preseason to earn that spot, or should the Knicks start looking elsewhere?
It's going to be tough, man, because just the way they have to navigate that second apron, it's going to be hard to just bring somebody in depending on how much he's going to cost. But I think Tibbs will lean towards Sims based on the experience factor. But I think it's going to be a short time frame before Ariel Huck-Purdy gets in there, because he provides him with the energy. He's always active on the pick and roll defense, rebounding. Again, he kind of gives them that edge, that grit that they're going to need from the backup center position. But right now, without Mitchell Robinson, they're going to be in a bit of a tough spot until he comes back.
I like Hawk Porty. We talked about that. I liked him a lot when I saw you out at Summer League. J-Mac, you like Hawk Porty too?
Yeah.
Do you think this is a moment where he can take that back at 5 spot?
I like him. I think playing center for Tibbs in particular, with all he asks his centers to do on defense. He doesn't ask much of them on offense, right? But on defense, he asks a lot of them. I think that's a tall ask for any rookie. I know he's not that young. He's played professionally, I think, since he was pretty young. He was a teenager. So that bodes well for him. I'm fascinated by the backup center position from this perspective. That could be a 12 to 14 minute a night proposition, or if you want to slide Towns over to the 4 for, let's say 12 to 14 minutes, all of a sudden that could be a 25-minute a night thing. So if they're, and again, it's early for trade talk, but if they're looking at someone they could potentially bring in that might, cost them a little bit more, and again, there's apron issues here, that's not necessarily someone that's only going to play a few minutes here and there. That could be a significant piece for them depending on how they deploy Towns, which is another reason why Towns is, I think, an X factor for me.
Right, why he's so valuable there. And then there also is a question of what do the Knicks do once Mitchell Robinson comes back, if he can come back and he's healthy. That is something to watch on too. J-Mac, in terms of the Eastern Conference landscape, where do you think the Knicks rank right now? How do you see them matching up? Particularly, this is what the Knicks fans want to know. Yeah. How do they match up against Boston? How do you see the Knicks matching up against the Celtics team?
I think they are as well suited to beat the Celtics as any team. I would actually go so far as to say in the NBA. I think when you put the Towns piece out there and his shooting, and you put Brunson out there and his shot creation, I think those two things together, that should be the toughest to guard two-man combination in basketball. Yeah. And granted, the Celtics are as well suited, as you know this as well as I do, CP. The Celtics can guard difficult two-man combos as well as anyone. We saw them guard Doncic last year in the finals. That said, that is their ceiling. The Knicks also have a floor. And I don't know what that floor is. I think it depends on health, which we've talked about a lot already. But, look, the Milwaukee Bucks came into last season with championship aspirations. They had trouble getting 2 games in the first round off of a Pacers team that wasn't even supposed to make the playoffs, a lot of people thought before the year. A lot of things could go wrong. I do think, though, if they are healthy, they should be considered the second-best team in the East. Now, obviously, they're already banged up. But even if they could get Achua back pretty soon, they get Shamet back or someone to replace Shamet's minutes, and none of the other key figures miss a ton of time, yeah, I think they'll finish second in the East.
All right, second in the East. We're going to get to predictions, official predictions, in a second. CP, let me ask you this, because we're on the brink of the season, starts on Tuesday. If you had to pinpoint one area where the Knicks need to improve the most, what would it be for you, and then how do you think they should address that area this season?
It's the bench. Definitely the bench for me. I mean, prior to the Cat trade, after the Bridges trade, you would have thought of their bench as them being one of the deepest teams, if not the deepest team in the league, when you looked at the prospect of adding DiVincenzo and Josh Hart to the bench with Deuce McBride, with Campaign and so on. You're like, oh, man, bench, we're pretty set. But now you have Landry Shamet going down, Precious Achua going down, and so now you're left with Campaign and Deuce McBride as your most reliable bench units. Last year, the Knicks struggled in Jalen Brunson's minutes. When Jalen Brunson was off the floor, they struggled. And so who's going to pick up that firepower? How will they flow? That's why I'm looking at is Mikal Bridges going to log a lot of those minutes with that bench unit. Where do they go to add in those 2 roster spots? Is it waiting for Shamet to come back if they get good news there? Does T.J. Warren, who's in Westchester, does he ultimately get a look? Is it the rookies that step in? Pacome Dadier, Kolick. They may have those options, but now you're at a point where, you spent a lot of assets. You spent a lot of draft capital, and so it's a little bit tighter in navigating that second apron. So it's not going to be easy to just say, go out at the trade deadline and get this guy, because now future ramifications are relying on it.
Yeah, they are. Depth is, and we keep coming back to, is a concern for the Knickerbockers. It's really going to be intriguing to see how they navigate it, who steps up, how that all works out. All right, here we go. Best case and worst case scenario. Sorry, we got to talk about this, folks. J-Mac, what will be the best case scenario for the Knicks this season? What needs to go right in order for them to reach that potential?
Well, I would have said health needs to go right, but that ship is already kind of pulling away from port. Best case scenario, I think they could win 55 games, give or take a few. 1 seed, certainly, and I think they can make the finals. Again, I think this team is capable of beating Boston. I think they're capable of beating any team in the league. What needs to go right? Put health aside for a second. I think that because of the moves that they've made and because they've gone all in, obviously, with Cat, I think the offense needs to be, I don't even want to say a top 5 offense. I think it kind of needs to be a top 3 offense. Like, it needs to push to be the best offense in basketball. It needs to find that level of cohesion, coherence, whatever word you want to use, where when they go out there and they are playing their game, there's not anybody really that could stop them. And then what needs to go right on the defensive end, I want to, we haven't talked about it a lot. I want to see how they continue to use Towns defensively. We've seen him almost exclusively in drop coverage so far in the preseason. That's not something that they've done a lot with him in Minnesota over the last few years because that's not really his strong suit. He's looked okay doing it so far, but I think, the difference between them reaching their ceiling and maybe and not is like, are they the 7th best defense in the league, 8th best defense, or are they more middle of the pack? You know what, Tibbs' defense is not going to be that bad. But the difference between those two could be the difference between a 1-2 seed versus, 3, 4, 5.
All right, so that is the best case scenario. CP, we got to talk about the worst case scenario because sometimes seasons go the way we do not think they were going to go. On the flip side, what's the worst case scenario for the Knicks and what pitfalls could hold them back from that success that J-Mac just talked about?
Worst case scenario, you have an injury-plagued, injury-riddled season, and you kind of fall by the wayside. Maybe it's a first-round exit, or maybe second-round exit. But it's possible, especially with OG Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns. You have Mitchell Robinson, so those things are there. But you know what? I think every team can argue that they're dealing with the injury bug. You look at the Celtics with Porzingis, or Milwaukee Bucks with Middleton, even maybe it's Giannis or Dame. And on the West, you've got Denver with Jamal Murray. So every team kind of has that injury bug where, if something happens to a frontline guy, they could be on the outside looking in. But also for the Knicks, I want to see if they can maintain their defensive edge, especially on the rebounding. Will they maintain that? Can they also offensive rebound if they're not making their shots? That was one of the things when you had Mitchell Robinson there and Isaiah Hartenstein, them being a second chance opportunity team, one of the best at it over the last few years, help them offensively. What happens if they're not making their shots? Do they have a go-to to get high-efficiency shots? A lot of the top contenders in this league over the past few years, from Denver to even Boston, have a way to get accurate, high-efficiency shots at the rim. So for the Knicks, I want to see that because they kind of lost the guy that can really get to the basket, that can really break down the defense, get to the basket, and draw contact. So how will they utilize that with their schemes? Are there more cuts involved where they can fall to the basket, get some guys there? So I want to see how they come together offensively, but also, from an injury standpoint, those things can derail their season. I think that could be worst case scenario.
Keeps coming back to health. That seems like the major concern around the Knicks in depth, as we mentioned a bunch here. Okay, last thing for me, guys. Based on what you've seen this far in the preseason, what's your predictions for the Knicks? I want a win total and playoff seeding. I'm not going to championship. We will save that for down the road, folks. But win total, playoff seeding, what do you think the Knicks are going to do this year? CP, I got you first.
I'm going 54. 54 wins.
54?
Second seed in the East.
54 wins, second seed in the East. All right, J-Mac, what do you have?
I'll go 53 wins. Shout out Robert Cross. And I'll go 3 seed, actually, just to switch it up,
All right, so we got them around 54, 53 wins, expecting this to be a pretty good, enjoyable year for the Knicks. And you know what that says, folks? The Knicks start off 5-5. Like I said, some of y'all are going to be doom and gloom. Don't have to be. It can end up okay. I like 50-plus wins. I haven't given a prediction. I'm thinking about it now. I'm going to say 55. I'm going to change it from 50.
Wow.
I'm going to go a little higher. I'm going to say 55 wins for the Knicks this year. If that happens, I think it's a pretty good season. I'm going to go 2 seed as well, too.
There we go.
55 wins. Give them the 2 seed. We'll figure out the other stuff, what happens after that. Now, before we get out, I know this is a basketball show, but because the last time you sat here, you talked to me about the Yankees, and your Yankees are now in the World Series.
Yeah.
How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling like whatever Juan Soto wants, Cut him the blank check.
You are
man.
backing up the Brinks truck for that man.
When I saw that at bat last night, Dex, he's talking to the pitcher. The mind games. He's looking dead at the pitcher like, you don't have it. I'm on top of everything. So I'm looking at it the way he's fighting at that at bat. I said the next one he's going to launch out the park. Launches it out the park. Back up the Brinks truck, man.
I have a question, though.
Yeah.
I'm not a baseball guy, but out of curiosity, what happens if Steve Cohen is the one driving the Brinks truck?
I'll tell you what, this man is not going to feel good.
That would be a disaster. That would be a disaster. If they get into a bidding war with Steve Cohen and they let him go to Queens, this is generational talent, man. 25 years old.
I just had to ask because the last time you were in the studio, and even the last time I saw you, I feel like you weren't feeling that great. But now I see that you have happiness from baseball.
Yeah.
You're hoping for the happiness from the basketball, but I like. I'm not a Yankees fan, but I like that for you.
I like it, man. I like Luke Weaver, the closer. You know, leave Clay Holmes in the Bronx. Whatever you do, just leave him there off the World Series roster. It's Luke Weaver time. It's Tim Hill. All these guys in the pen, they're doing their thing. Stanton, playoff Stanton. You can't even pitch to the guy, man. They're looking great. This is a very different CP than we saw up here last time. I almost have to say, I feel like you're going to say world. You didn't predict championship for the Knicks, or are you predicting World Series win for the Yankees? Absolutely.
Oh, this is a new man, folks.
Yeah, number 28. Number 28.
J-Mac, I know you don't do the baseball, so I didn't have as much to ask you on that, but I had to ask him because I just felt the vibes were different with CP. So I had to ask him about that.
I mean, it might sound silly by the time this airs, but I'll say let's go Mets right now.
I like that. I do like that. You're not going to get me to say let's go for the other team. That is not going to happen. That is CP the Franchise, founder, host of Knicks Fan TV, and that is J-Mac, Jonathan Macri, the dean of Knicks Film School. Both of these guys doing a tremendous job with the content around the Knicks. They both have watch parties for the season opener. CP, tell the people about yours, and J-Mac, tell the people about yours.
Yeah, so we will be at Slate NYC. That's 21st Street and I think
5th
between
and 6th.
5th and 6th Avenue. So come by. We'll be open at 5 p.m. Going to be a great time, man.
Yeah. We're at T Squared Social, 42nd Street, right down the block from Grand Central Station. I think things are getting kicked off at 6. We got some giveaways. We're going to do some live trivia. And then, of course, game. It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be a good time. Those are my guys. Last year, I think it was for the Lakers game at home. I ended up coming to both of your watch parties. A good time at both places. I'm going to try to do the same on Tuesday. So definitely check it out. Appreciate y'all, as always, for coming through on New York Got Game and doing this season preview. Thankfully, no trades broke while we were recording this.
So.
We don't think so. And we will do this again throughout the season. Appreciate you guys.
Yes, sir.
Sounds good.
All right, so the season is getting tipped off this week, the NBA season that is. Then we'll have more to talk about later in the week because the WNBA season has come to a close. So a lot to look back on in terms of the New York Liberty. That does it for this edition of New York Got Game. As always, special thanks to my guests, Jonathan Macri and CP the Franchise. Also, thank you to the people who make this great show possible. My director, Zachary Taub, producer Lee Insler, editors Kim Hyland and Rob Sickler. For this edition of New York Got Game, I'm Dexter Henry. We'll see you next week.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.